Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. Sorry while I figure this out. I have a degree in telecommunications. There we go. Hi, my name is Jenelle Riley. I'm the film and TV editor of Backstage. I'm so thrilled to honor you here. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here this afternoon for the SAG Foundation and Backstage screening with the Sessions. Genuinely one of my favorite films of the year, features some of the best performances I've seen all year, and at this point I'm so honored to get to welcome some of the cast. First, please welcome... You can barely hear me? I have never been told that in my life. Seriously, is the mic on now? Okay. Usually it's quite the opposite. It's keep it down. All right, first we have the actress you might recognize from such shows as Southland or Law & Order: Criminal Intent. She is a major revelation in the film as Amanda. Please welcome Annika Marks. Also, we are so lucky to have the actor who brings Mark O'Brien to life on screen. You might recognize him from things as varied as Deadwood to Eastbound and Down, or movies like The Perfect Storm to Me and You and Everyone We Know, and of course Winter's Bone, for which he received an Academy Award nomination and an Independent Spirit Award, and just last week he was nominated for another Independent Spirit Award for his portrayal of Mark O'Brien. Please welcome John Hawkes. Thank you guys so much for being here. Congratulations on a beautiful movie. John, another award you received for this film was the Hollywood Film Awards Breakthrough Performer. How does it feel to be a breakthrough performer after 30 years in this business?
It feels good.
And because this is a SAG audience, I always like to start by asking, how'd you get your SAG card?
I got upgraded on a TV show when I was like 19 years old, and then didn't work through SAG for a while after that. But it was like the one thing I had going for me was that I was a SAG member. So,
and you kept up to date on your dues, I'm sure.
I did.
Okay.
I did. Yeah.
How late's the office open for dues? I realize I owe mine. That reminds me. November 30th, wasn't it? I think so.
You can't vote for yourself now.
Yeah, that's okay.
And you're not going to get a screener. Oh.
4:30, 5 o'clock, how late? For me, I was in Austin, Texas, and it was a right-to-work state, and I got in enough small kind of they went that-away parts back in Austin. Anybody want a Coke? Several of those roles. And so I was eligible, and I moved here in 1990 and joined at that point.
Do you remember the first thing you did when you got to Hollywood?
It was, I think it was probably a show called Babes, a sitcom.
I don't even remember this.
Good.
Were you one of the babes?
No, I wasn't, but there was an actor named and stand-up comic named Rick Overton on the show, and I admired him a great deal, so I was just thrilled to get to meet him, and he's a very nice guy.
Was he one of the babes?
No.
No. Someone who's seen the show is like, no. So I want to start at the beginning with the Sessions. This is from writer-director Ben Lewin. It's a beautiful script. How did it find its way to you, and what appealed to you about your roles?
You have a better story.
Well, I had luck after Winter's Bone to have a choice of projects. The studio projects were similar to what I'd done, 12 years ago on Winter's Bone. They weren't offering much more money even, and I ended up choosing ultimately, I think, the lowest budget on the stack, which was this film called The Surrogate at the time. And it was such a interesting story. It was so beautifully written. The character was so unusual and singular and challenging. Plus, it was definitely the best story about a poet in an iron lung that wants to lose his virginity that I'd read in a couple of months. That right there. I met with Ben Lewin. I wish he was here. If you ever have a chance to meet Ben Lewin or work with him, jump at it. He's a very sweet, wonderful, capable man. And so I'm glad it all worked out.
And for you, I believe I've heard that you were one of the first people cast?
Yeah, second after John, I think, actually. And I had sort of the opposite experience. I mean, no one is sending me scripts to read, so it was an audition. I mean, Ronnie Eskel, who's the casting director, who's fabulous and actually cares about finding new talent and cultivating it, had seen me in a couple equity waiver plays in LA and actually paid attention. And when this role came up, got me in to meet with Ben. And I second what John said. He's one of the greatest people out there. And I got lucky enough that he took a chance, and because this was an independently produced film, he didn't have to get permission from anybody who would have told him, why don't you hold out and see if we can get somebody off one of those lists that we're always hearing about. So, I got very lucky.
You guys keep saying luck. I think there's maybe a little more to it than that. I think you might be being modest.
No, well, I think that we've all done work that we hoped others would see, and they didn't. So the luck for me is that partly the getting to be part of something that was joyful and fulfilling, but I think the luck also is that it happened to find its way to an audience. So there's no controlling that. That's luck.
And I would say I do think I'm lucky. I mean, I've auditioned for a lot of really bad movies too, and I haven't booked them, And if I had, that's what I'd be sitting here talking. I mean, it's not like any that's really within your control, right? And I am lucky. I mean, I've. Are you kidding? I got to do something that this is exactly what I said I wanted to do when I decided to become an actor, and I've done it. So this is, it was truly living the dream that I'd sort of created for myself or imagined for myself.
So you can retire now.
Yeah, I'm done.
Done, yeah.
It's my going away party.
We'll miss you.
I just want to make sure I got this right. You basically booked this role because you did LA theater.
Yes.
And a big casting director saw you and called you in.
Yes.
It is not an urban legend, people.
It happens. It happens. It happens. Yeah, and actually I would go, it's even bigger than that. She saw me in a reading, and then saw me in one play, and saw me in another play, and I kept thinking, why does she keep coming and seeing in me and things and not calling me into audition? And it was like 5 years of that, and then the right role came along, and she's that good, and I think she's that specific, and she's not going to waste anybody's time, but they exist, and she's one of them.
I auditioned for Ronnie Eskel shortly after coming to town, and she was the first casting director that I felt saw me, and I felt got by her somewhat. She called me in, I believe. I looked on I used to keep note cards of everyone that I met, casting directors, producers, directors, still kind of keep up with it a bit, but I looked over that as I presented Ronnie with an award, and I think she called me in 13 times after that, never cast me, but kept saying every time I came in, you belong here. And finally got this one, so it's good.
Was this the first time she'd cast you?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Only took 22 years.
It is your breakthrough year.
Good point.
That's right. John, what was that initial meeting with Ben like? Oh, and for those who don't know, Ben himself is a polio survivor.
True.
Yeah. And walks with the aid of crutches. So
He does.
Had a very unique insight into this, I'm sure.
Well, I didn't know that Ben was a polio survivor until we'd set up the meeting, and we called to finalize the details as to where exactly the deli in West LA that he wanted me to meet him at was, and he says, I'm the bald-headed gimp with crutches and suspenders. And so He was easy to pick out.
And you were like, suspenders.
It's one of my favorite parts of Ben, actually. He generally wears suspenders. Often they look like carpenter tape with, inches and things like that on them.
Like under tuxedos, like bright yellow.
Generally, yeah. Our first meeting was fantastic. We were definitely feeling each other out. I think there are many questions to be asked and answered, kind of from both sides. And he took a chance. I'm glad he did.
Do you remember some of the questions, some of the things you talked about?
Many, yes. And my first question was why an able-bodied actor for the role? And Ben told me that he'd spent a couple of years, he'd auditioned some terrific actors, able and otherly abled, and hadn't quite found his Mark O'Brien. I think Tobias is here, or was. I think that he was definitely in contention. Too good looking and too young, I think, was the idea there, but he cast Tobias in the film as the oral sex expert. Yeah. He's terrific in the role. Sorry, don't crane your necks. Tobias, when you play in the House of Blues? Saturday
This
night.
Saturday?
Check it out. Yes, indeed.
What's the name of the group? City's in at the House of Blues this
Check him
Saturday
out.
night.
He's awesome. He just felt like he hadn't quite found the guy, and thought maybe I could do it. I was interested in trying to find humor wherever possible. The situation is fraught at the outset, and I don't like to play the ending as an actor and storyteller. It's, could have been a real maudlin sort of downer take on the movie that we could have decided upon. We didn't. I think that there's any truthful details that we could find that weren't overly gaggy were welcome. I think anything that brought comedy. I was interested in fighting self-pity, and Ben thought that was good. And Ben mentioned that Mark should be neither victim nor saint, and I really thought that was cool, to try to make him a real human being, warts and all. And, beyond that, we discussed possibilities for other cast members a bit, and I took a while to decide, strangely. Ben hadn't made a movie in many years, and when I was worried by that, why this guy's 65 years old and still hasn't really, broken out much. During that week I was deciding, I was worried I would just read the script again and think, this guy knows how to tell a story. This guy knows how to tell a story. He'd written this beautiful script. And I'm glad that I trusted him and that he trusted me.
I believe his last film was in 1994, Paperback Romance.
True.
Did you go back and watch any of his films?
I did.
Yeah. Because I know that when Ronnie Yeskel recommended you, he went and watched Winter's Bone and was like, this scary guy?
I think what he said was, that creepy old guy.
I was being nice.
Thank you. No need.
But then he started to see you in other things and realized he was actually a fan. He just didn't know it was the same actor in A Perfect Storm, Me and You, and Everyone We Know, Eastbound and Down, and he was like, and Deadwood.
Yeah, I take it as a compliment.
Absolutely. And then I believe after you signed on, the rest of the cast started to come into place, largely because you were there. I'm
Okay.
Annika, actually, at any point were you worried you were going to lose your job to someone on one of those lists?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was offered the job, it did seem rather impulsive. Like I got a call that same day, and it was from Ronnie, and I sort of thought, like I've heard you hear these stories, and then it was every day they would call and say somebody else is attached, and there were just like too many wonderful people coming on board, and I kept thinking, so the next call will be, you were great, but, and he, not only did he stick with me, but his wife, Judy, who was producing the film with him, and Stephen Nemeth, like, this is an amazing group of people, and like John, everybody trusted Ben. I don't think there was anybody questioning Ben's creative decisions, and I think that's why the film works. It is a very singular vision, and yeah, I got lucky.
And from what I understand, this film is totally independently financed. I don't know, can you say the budget and the shooting schedule?
I think that it was dollars. I don't think we're allowed to say. Judy Levine says it's an expensive home movie. It was a great way to shoot, though. They went the traditional route to studios and to big people who put up money for films and said, we got this great idea, yeah, guy in an iron lung, wants to lose his virginity, has to pay for it with a sexual surrogate. They're Aussies, and they'd grown up with some people who'd done really well in business. They approached their friends first, and as Judy says, took advantage of their family's naivete around the film business. They got a quarter of the budget from one of their friends, and by the end, were calling people for $5,000. At first, family members saying, "Will you give $5,000?" And near the end, "You're in for $5,000." And what that enabled us to do is to make a film without adults present. There was no people in ties and business suits saying, you know, this is being recorded. No one in ties or business suits saying, you know, what if Mark got cured of polio and rescued Helen from a burning building, and they were able to ride down the beach on horses in the sunset as the credits rolled? That just didn't happen. So we all kept looking around, waiting for someone to tell us that we, you know, should take some other approach, and no one was there to do it. It was a very freeing experience, a truly independent film.
How refreshing. And once you had the parts, how did you go about preparing to play these characters? Did you do any particular kind of research?
Well, Marks wrote, you know, a ton, so there's a lot out there. I read How I Became a Human Being, which is this wonderful book that he wrote, and he talks quite a bit about this period of his life in it. And I found a lot in that because he did project his feelings onto all sorts of caretakers, and one in particular he really did fall for, who that poem is written for. And so I read that, and then there's this wonderful documentary short called Breathing Lessons that won the Oscar in '97, I think, that Jessica Yu made, and it's extraordinary. And so I kind of watched that and tried to fall in love with that man, and then I just showed up and met this guy and had to fall in love with him, and then it was easy. It was like, oh, you know, it was not, it wasn't that hard. Yeah, so I did what I could do, but I will say that the first time I heard John speak on set, it was an incredibly sort of a miraculous moment, I think. Cheryl was there, the real Cheryl, and I know she had an incredibly visceral response to hearing his voice, and he had so tapped into Mark's essence that I think it was almost on the verge of being creepy. You know, you felt like you were...
That word pops up a lot with John, apparently.
I know my folks are proud. Get that a lot. Oh, your son's the creepy actor. Yes, it's us. Are you done?
How did you prepare?
Oh, well, certainly Mark's writings were hugely beneficial. His autobiography gave me a backstory that I would normally invent. I love detail. I feel like the more specific you can be when you tell a story, the more universal the story will become, even if it's a very specific story foreign to the observer. So there were so many details that were offered in his autobiography, his journalism, his poetry. And Jessica Yu's film was something I really leaned on a great deal. I watched the movie over and over. One, for its detail, as I mentioned, and also because I really wanted to try to capture the essence of the Mark that I saw on screen, much more compelling person than I could ever hope to invent. And I wanted to try to get his voice and his body positioning and as much as I could, because I wanted people who know Mark, who might see the film, to see, you know, as much of their friend or relative as possible in what I'd done. Beyond that was a lot of physical work, a mouth stick, and you know, typing and turning pages and making phone calls and things, and trying to figure out how to it says in the script twice that Mark's spine is horribly curved. As an actor, you can't disregard that, and so I figured out a way to curve my spine a bit, and yeah, ultimately wanted to make all of this stuff, as I always do as an actor, second nature, and forget it all when the director calls action, so I could just be present with the other performers and let what was supposed to happen. Most of the time I would forget I was horizontal and just felt like an actor in a scene, which like a human being, which I think is a lot the point of the film as well.
So you said, found a way to curve my spine. You're going to have to elaborate on that.
There was a ball of foam about the size of a soccer ball that the props people and myself and NASA, oddly, involved. I'm kidding. It wasn't really. Just a crude piece of foam with tape around it that I placed midway into the left side of my back to give it a pretty good curve.
Mm-hmm. Was that painful?
Yeah. But a minute amount of pain compared to what many people deal with in their lives every day, so it wasn't a big deal.
Was it dangerous? I think I read somewhere that your organs were migrating.
Yeah, I think they're in Florida now.
Yeah,
I'm not
the
sure.
winter.
I gotta fly there tomorrow and see if I can catch up to them. Don't even like Florida, no offense. Don't know why they'd go there.
I've got a good John being in pain on set story.
Easy.
So I know, I won't use the word creepy, I promise. We were doing the shaving scene, and and he was totally in the iron lung for that scene, so he doesn't have the ability. I mean, you forget, right, that on set, there's things that are happening on set. There's sweat, there's, flies or whatever, and John, can't scratch his own face and all of that. So he's incredibly vulnerable. And I think it was probably our second day of shooting or something. I was, a little nervous. And we're doing the shaving scene, and a piece of shaving cream sort of flies off the razor and lands in John's eye. Yeah. And I thought, well, that's great. So I have now blinded John Hawkes.
National treasure
This
John
is
Hawkes
good.
is
This
blind.
is good.
because of you,
This
yes.
is going well, yeah. And it was like, people ran over with warm washcloths, and, you were unbelievably calm. And afterwards, I was beside myself, and I was saying, I'm so sorry. And John said, you gave me a gift. He said, Mark, that stuff happened to Mark all the time, and that was a gift.
Aw.
That was how he dealt with it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. You don't remember that?
I remember storming out of the iron lung back to the trailer, making
it was
phone
like
calls
a-
to SAG, I remember.
It was a very meaningful moment for me.
You're kind. Thank you so much. I know that something was going right because a lot of times on the gurney, I would just lay between takes if they were changing lights or camera position. And Mark used to say that he felt invisible to able-bodied people, and that was one of the few times I really felt like something was going right, that I was doing something right. The camera wasn't rolling, but I'd be on the gurney, and suddenly there'd be pieces of wardrobe and sodas and sandwiches laying on me. People would just forget that I was there, I guess. So that felt good. It did.
I've mentioned this amazing cast. I want to talk specifically about Helen Hunt, who plays Cheryl Cohen Green. Had you met before, or was this your first time?
We had not met before being cast.
Wow. And, I mean, love scenes are awkward under any circumstance. And in this case, you have the added elements of being strangers. You're unable to move your body. Were they difficult scenes to shoot, and how did you approach them? Did you have many discussions beforehand with Ben and Helen?
Well, Ben Lewin did a really wonderful thing, and that is that he chose to shoot the intimate scenes in story order, in chronological order. And so the fact that Helen and I didn't know each other well, that we hadn't spent any time alone ever, we sat on either side of Ben and had a couple of fairly traditional kind of script conferences where we just talked about what we felt worked or what the idea was for there. But as far as Helen and I really playing the scene, we hadn't discussed it. So, when you do a play, you find moments and you find them again each night for the audience. You recreate them, generally. One thing that film does really specifically and singularly is to capture first moments between performers on screen. And I think there's an electricity there and a danger there that's interesting. And so the very first scene between Helen and I, there's a lot of things happening in real time and for the first time. And I think, again, that kind of charges the actors and hopefully translates onto the screen. We weren't well rehearsed. We didn't know each other. Love scenes are supposed to be, are often, as you said, awkward, unfamiliar, and we really embrace that. It's unintentionally funny. These are things that are often then edited out with rose petals and music and made to look like a perfect fantasy, which we weren't interested in. So, and as we continued to shoot the sessions, scenes, as Helen and I got to know each other better and got more comfortable, so were our characters a bit. So it was really a handy way to shoot. It was a very lucky thing.
For each of you, what was the most difficult scene to shoot? What do you think was her most difficult scene?
I would say the scene in the park where you have to cry and leave. The Germany, there's humor's forbidden or whatever that scene.
Yeah.
Is that right or no?
Will you go first?
Okay. I was vamping because I don't know either. The most difficult scene to shoot.
I'll tell you what your
Okay,
most difficult
please.
scene to shoot was. Oh,
We need
anything
you.
with William H. Macy, because he's a diva. Nicest man in the universe. Couldn't be further from the truth.
It's true.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, no, that was
your
okay.
answer?
I was vamping too.
I think maybe the first session scene was challenging because it was difficult to twist my body into an unusual, painful position, but harder to hold that position without movement for long periods in shots that were, 7 minutes long from a distance where you can see the whole frame of Mark at that point. So I'm sure I'll think of something better, but that's where we'll start right there.
I actually think the most difficult scene for me was the clothing store scene because it was the first day, and so we just met, and it felt like this really pivotal moment in their relationship, and so much that has come before. And I'd never worked with the gurney before, and that was sort of cumbersome, that thing, and figuring out how to maneuver it in a really small space. And but I haven't done a ton of film, like that's any surprise to anybody sitting here. But I haven't done a ton of film, so the technical aspects of it are always kind of shocking to me, how you sort of show up with a sense of what you think you need and what you think you need to communicate or how you want to connect, and you wind up overwhelmed with technicality. And I'm still trying to figure out the balance of all of that, like how much of your brain do you give to that before you've actually abandoned your job, as an actor, and I'm still figuring that out.
I want to take some questions from the audience, and as always, I apologize in advance if I butcher anyone's name. I'll start with an easy one. Katie wants to know, what advice would you give to an aspiring and young actor? Did you have a favorite actor, role model, or mentor in your earlier years as you began your journey?
Can you repeat the question? I'm kidding. Who did I? For
What
me,
advice would you give to an
advice.
aspiring
That's
young
okay.
actor?
That's what I'd
And
missed.
did you have a favorite actor, role model, or mentor in your earlier years?
Sure. I think if you do one thing for your career every day, you put yourself a little ahead of other people, whether it's trying to learn to be a better cold reader or submitting yourself on a project or taking a class or getting together with friends and reading or being in a play, making your own short, all those kind of things I think are important. I read once that the people who succeed in Hollywood, and I would guess anywhere, aren't the people who never get knocked down because everyone gets knocked down. It's the people who get up and take another step forward. I would also give advice to someone starting out, the cruel advice that we've all heard that's so frightening, but ultimately loving and true, which is if there's anything else you want to do, you should do it and be happy. But if this is all that you want to do, be really thankful that you found something that drives you, because people rarely do in this world, and more rarely do they embrace it and take the risk to try and do it. That's a couple pieces of advice, I guess. I grew up with one channel on TV, so I didn't have a lot of entertainment options. I remember loving Don Knotts in the movies that I would see as a kid. the matinees that I would get dropped off and go into see at the theater when parents could drop off 6-year-olds and pick them up later. Very overprotective mother. It's hard to believe now when you think back how it all worked. But and I liked the TV show The Odd Couple and Tony Randall, oddly. So I guess I went nerdy. I got like nerdy guys, nerdy specific, funny guys. I guess those were when I was, before I was 15, people I liked. I guess.
We have a question from Scott. Wants to know if you could share a fun experience you had on set. Was there much levity on this set, or was it?
There's that shaving cream thing.
Yeah. And also, what do you like to do for fun when you're not working?
I like traveling. I mean, if I could, that's the other piece of this that I think is really important, is not getting tunnel visioned as an actor. Like, I do think actors limit themselves when they stop exploring the world, because I don't know how you continue to be inspired to create new characters and until you discover new facets of yourself. And I just don't know how you stay inspired without that. And sometimes I meet people who like never leave LA, and I think, how can you be an actor and never want to figure out how other people live, So as often as I can, I get out of the country, and yeah, I guess that it feels almost like part of my job to me. I feel like it's that significant.
That sounded a little suspicious the way you said it. As often as I can, I get out of the country.
That's how I meant it.
I enjoy interpretive dance. I do, actually, but alone. With a mouth stick. No, that's not true. I'll relate a story that Ben tells. The very first nudity in the film was Helen Hunt at when she takes the bath in the mikveh scene. Ben, I think, really enjoys women, and
you think?
His wife knows it, and yet Ben was also really kind of freaked out about the nudity the first day for that scene, and the crew was, there was a weight on the set, as he described it, and it just, people were not acting themselves, and it was uncomfortable, and they kind of got ready to do the first take, and they did, and everyone turned away, and they called cut, and Rhea Perlman reportedly said, "What a body!" And everyone laughed, and that would kind of set the tone, and everything was cool from there on. So Helen included was like, "Ooh, thank you, this is good."
We have a question from Colleen. What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you first started?
This is a good question for me. I'm not sure I know anything now that I didn't know when I first started. No, I wish somebody had told me when I left theater school. I wish somebody had told me that it's a business, that it's not just about the work. I feel like I went to a conservatory where people were very focused on the work, and I appreciate all of that very much. But it's a business, and until you sort of learn, like John's saying, you do something for your business every day, you are your own business. And I think until, as actors, you manage to embrace that, I can remember standing in open call lines in New York at like 4 a.m. and looking at these like sea of actors winding around city blocks and thinking like every single one of these people believes their 5 minutes in that room will get them the job, or they wouldn't be here, that you're all talented. That's not enough. So you do have to figure out this other piece of it, and I wish somebody had encouraged me to do that earlier.
Hi. Something I wish somebody had told me before.
I mean, you just broke through this year, so maybe we should.
It's a good point. I will tell you, it doesn't really answer the question, but I still have the joy, I guess, complicated joy that I've had for 20-some years of doing this, which is to be next to the matte box for someone else's close-up, off camera, feeding them, just really with them in the scene, 2 feet away. And a number of times we've shot the scene, and I've walked back to get something to eat at craft service or whatever, and I think to myself, that poor bastard. I didn't believe a minute of that. I go to the movie and it's great.
Yeah.
So that about putting a frame around it and music and context, I'm still confused by it. So I guess that if the question was, what's something you wish you understood that you've never quite figured out, it's how film acting works. I've seen people that I thought were overdone be just right. I've seen people that I thought were subtle and fantastic and beautiful be flat. I'm confused kind of every time by it, and I like that. That's a good thing. I haven't figured it out. I'm not bored with it by any means because I'm still making my way.
I want to mention that this film premiered almost a year ago, I guess, at the 2012 Sundance Film Festival, where it won not only the Audience Award, but a special jury prize for the ensemble. What was it like seeing it with an audience for that first time?
Would you like me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. It was okay. Not at all. I hadn't seen the film, and for me, and this will never happen again, and I don't have a movie at Sundance this year, but I had the really lucky experience of having Winter's Bone, Martha, Marcy May, Marlene, and this movie play not only on the same Monday, the first Monday of the festival, but in the same theater at the same time. So it's like a 12:30 Monday at the Eccles, the big, how many, 1,600 people or something. I couldn't tell as the movie was going on what was happening exactly or if the audience was getting it, but I started to hear people reaching into pockets and sniffling and things like that, and I knew there was actually a lot of laughter, and that was always a good sign. I know that if you want to open people up to more complicated emotions, that laughter is an incredibly great way to do that. When the movie, and I'm going to get choked up now, when the movie ended and the lights came up and Ben Lewin, 4'9", 65 years old, the bald gimp with suspenders on crutches, as he said, made his way to the stage. It was really, really great. It was that kind of made the whole thing worth it. Just because Sundance is really about the 28-year-old first-time filmmaker so often. And here was this amazingly cool guy who had just lived his life and raised his children and came across this article online. And there he was, the toast of Sundance. It was really great, really, really wonderful. Annika?
Yeah, follow that.
Allow me to disappoint you.
He set you up. Now spike the ball.
That's the worst setup. The ball's rolling up to her feet, you want her to spike it.
Did you get any response from people who knew Mark, like Cheryl and Susan? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. That was another part of the preparation, was that the real Cheryl Cohen Green, the real Susan Fernbach, who's played so wonderfully in our film by Robin Weigert at the end of the movie.
Deadwood reunion.
Deadwood alumnus,
Yeah.
Calamity Jane. Fantastic. As was Earl Brown, who played Rod. What was the question?
Oh, if you got feedback from them.
Oh, yeah,
Did they see
feedback.
the film?
Yes, they were.
They were both at Sundance.
They were at that screening, and I hope felt vindicated. I know that Jessica Yu, who I made breathing lessons, who knew Mark well, and who I, had corresponded with or spoken on the phone with and met a couple of times, came to the second screening, and she's no nonsense, wonderfully great human being, but not a smoke blower. Didn't seem like a very overly emotional person to me, but after that screening there was, it was like a 5-minute hangout of her just saying it was like being with Mark for an hour and a half, so that was really cool. And several other people who've known him have come up and told us we did a good job. Now there are probably people who knew him who don't feel that way, who we haven't spoke to, but so far so good.
Susan, one of the cool things that Susan did, it actually didn't make it into the film, but Ben asked her to write a eulogy for Mark. So that funeral scene, Bill got out there and actually read this piece that Susan had written for him, and that was pretty wonderful, and she sent flowers, and it did feel like this, this sort of celebration of Mark's life. It was really special. It's like the one day you weren't on set.
I didn't show up for the funeral.
Didn't want to go to your own funeral?
I did not.
Well, I want to thank you so much for bringing Mark back to life for all of us to enjoy. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you guys.
Thank you.